What does it really take to be a big pop star these days? Add a splash of oddball fashion and have a catchy tune that hits the hook in the first minute? For some iconic music stars like David Bowie or Prince, that might have been an easier job to accomplish as a guy. But for women in the music business in the 70s and 80s, you had to be a real trailblazer. And for Debbie Harry, aka Blondie, it was a lifetime of proving she had more than just a pop song to sing. But it's not just the music she helped develop or the style that launched careers of singers like Lady Gaga or Shirley Manson of the band Garbage. Debbie Harry didn't exactly have a plan on how to get to the top, but her instincts and her personality certainly shaped her lifelong career. Facts Verse presents Debbie Harry, Behind Blondie's Sexy Punk Princess. Before you find out her secrets of success, click subscribe and like, and be sure to comment below. Debbie was adopted. They say that some people are destined for fame and glory at an early age, but for others, it's a long and hard road. Debbie Harry was born with another name to parents that couldn't make things work. Her original name was Angela Trimble and was adopted by her new parents when Debbie was still a baby. Her father decided to put her up for adoption when it turned out he was married to another woman and already had 2 kids of his own. Luckily, Debbie's new parents were a loving couple who raised Debbie in Hawthorne, New Jersey. Despite her adoption, she actually learned she was adopted by the age of 4, yet it never seemed to bother her much. Her new parents, Richard and Catherine Harry, were very supportive of her unique braveness and curious nature about the world around her. Even growing up, she wondered who her mother was and became fascinated with the idea that Marilyn Monroe was her actual mom. This might have driven her to become something bigger than life, but for Debbie, it was all about doing it her way. A real wildflower child. As all kids grow up, they start to embrace the finer things in life, like going to parties, live concerts, and experimenting with all the things your parents told you not to do. For Debbie, being a free-spirited young adult in the 1960s gave her exposure to the kinds of bands we all would have wished to see in person. Not only did she go to concerts to see Janis Joplin, the Velvet Underground, and the Doors, her interest in the hippie movement was well-rounded in liking music styles and creative clothing choices. Even her interest in Jimi Hendrix's musical styles wasn't out of the question. It wasn't too long after that, when she graduated from Centenary College in New Jersey, that she moved across the river to New York City. To earn a living, she worked all sorts of odd jobs, including being a bunny at Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club. She would often spend her time living in the rent-controlled Lower East Side, going to local music venues with money she earned. But it wasn't until the early 70s that it pushed her to do something different. Crossover experimentation in music. As any fan of Debbie Harry will tell you, her interests in music styles have changed over the years. Her very first musical project started with a band called Wind in the Willows. It was closer to psychedelic folk music, and their band only made one album before they all broke up. The experience didn't keep her from finding an audience, which was a new genre in the East Village called post-punk. While this gave her credit for a different sound, another jealous female singer, Patti Smith, didn't think Debbie was worth sharing a stage with at CBGB's. Smith actually tried to steal band members from her as revenge, but luckily this didn't happen. Even the iconic punk rock band The Ramones got their first gig opening for Debbie's new group. It should be no surprise that she even dabbled in the very first rap songs called Rapture. It was at that time when she was beginning to be friends with Grandmaster Flash and Fab Five Freddy, who were developing rap in the New York City underground music scene. While her rap tribute is bizarre, she's never been afraid to experiment with her musical styles. Debbie's New York fashion. In the early 70s, New York City's Lower East Side was a pretty scary place to live. It was a high-crime area with a lot of drug addicts. It was also bankrupt, so many independent artists and bands that developed there had to be creative to survive. While Lydia Lunch was stealing food for her band buddies, Debbie Harry was developing her own clothing style. Sometimes it was a matter of finding stuff on the streets. She even made a tight-fitting dress from a zebra-printed pillowcase. Other times she would visit numerous thrift stores that often have clothing worth thousands that were sold for pennies on the dollar. By the time she was getting famous, she had help from her downstairs neighbor. All of her stage outfits at that time were made by Steven Sprouse, who was an up-and-coming fashion designer for Louis Vuitton. At one point, she had enough money to buy a dress that was worn by Marilyn Monroe from the film The 7-Year Itch. Her style has always been eclectic with a dark and mysterious side. Blowing up a real character. It took years for Deborah to open up about her life, but recently in her new tell-all memoir book, Face It, released in 2019, she finally broke the story of how she got her iconic name Blondie. For years, she joked with her fans through interviews that this was what delivery truck drivers would call out to her as she walked through the East Village. But then her iconic platinum blonde hair was a dead giveaway. Her band even launched an advertising campaign about the name, claiming Blondie is a group. As rumors persisted, there have been some stories that went so far to suggest that Debbie came up with the name because of Hitler's pet German shepherd who was named Blondie. However, her book tells a different story and talks about her determination to create a character based on a blow-up sex doll. It seems her alter ego is actually what men imagine women to be, except with a darker and sinister side. Her actual hair color may shock you since she was born a vibrant redhead. Which color do you think is better for Debbie Harry, her original red hair or her iconic blonde hair? Tell us in the comments section and press the like button. Debbie's Darkside. It's hard to imagine that through all her post-disco pop fame, Debbie would indulge in some dark thoughts. Even at an early age, she has admitted to having psychotic episodes, where dark forces and voices have contacted her. These even included images of complicated numbers and messages that were being delivered to her subconscious brain. By 1981, she was about to release her first solo album, Cuckoo, and joined forces with another dark artist who had just won an Academy Award. Swiss surrealist and artist H.R. Giger, whose frightening designs and sculptures for the movie Alien were a huge hit in Hollywood. Not only did Debbie have him create the look for her new album cover, but she also let him direct her music video. It wasn't too long after that they became good friends. He came to New York City and helped Debbie promote the album. While the album only sold a little over 500,000 copies, the artwork was banned in the United Kingdom, and the album itself was considered highly controversial. Her secret passion for fairy tales. You might not know that Debbie likes to have a fairy tale theme involved in all her work and albums. It originally started with her first band that was named Wind in the Willows, which is based on the children's writer Kenneth Grahame. While this is a slow-moving story for kids, it also served as a light version of the old-fashioned cautionary tale. Many of the projects she took on were often fairy tale topics, and even some with Grimm Brothers-style endings. Others were considered taboo fairy tales that left most people shocked and disturbed. Her involvement with Tales from the Darkside started with the TV show and eventually the feature film. In the film version, her character is essentially a witch who traps and eats children. In the end, she's foiled, with the kids tossing her into a fiery oven, much like the Hansel and Gretel story ended. Yet in Videodrome, that was directed by David Cronenberg, Debbie plays a character that enjoys extreme sex and pain. The main character is lured into a virtual world that uses video signals to cause brain tumors. The ending of the film left most people with their jaw hanging on the floor, and continues to be one of Debbie's most disturbing characters. Deborah Harry, the unsung Hollywood star. In total, Deborah has worked on more than 60 film and television credits to her name. But in the fast-paced world of Hollywood decisions, there are some roles that she was supposed to play. Everyone by now knows that Blade Runner is yet another fantastic vision of the future from director Ridley Scott. She was first considered to play the blonde replicant, Pris, but later the producers decided on Daryl Hannah instead. This was after she turned it down due to pressure from her record company, who didn't want her to take on the extra work. She was also given the chance to write a James Bond theme song too, but again at the last minute, the new For Your Eyes Only song went to Sheena Easton. But if there's one film she was almost the star of, it was for American Gigolo. Debbie had her audition for the film, but was ultimately beaten out by another New York City local, Lauren Hutton. The producers still wanted her involved, and she ended up contributing the hit single Call Me, which became #1 on the music charts. Oddly enough, her song is only found on the soundtrack album. The French Connection? Some musicians love to sing in French, since this is the language of love. The Beatles have done it with Michel, and ABBA sang it proudly with Voulez-Vous. And more recently, Lady Gaga proved it still works with Bad Romance. But for Blondie singer Debbie Harry, she makes it sound as if she's been speaking French for years. Perhaps it's her dialogue coach or simply a good phonetic spelling that she sang perfectly. We'll never know. Among the most popular songs where she added French lyrics turned out to be big hits for her as well. Her big hit Dennis, released in 1978, isn't the standard love ballad you hear every day. Her other huge hit, Call Me, released in 1980, wasn't part of any of her album releases. Instead, it was part of the music soundtrack that gave Richard Gere his groove. Debbie wrote the song from his perspective, which might just change your opinion of what the song means when you hear it again. She also released an entire song called Sunday Girl in French that was first released in English. While it was a mild hit in the UK in 1981, it's become a fan favorite over the years. Wrestling with Andy Kaufman. Not too many people know that Debbie was a huge fan of big-time wrestling. For most of us, show wrestling is more of the modern version of Spartan warriors. But that doesn't mean you won't get hurt. For a short time, Debbie Harry got involved with this sport, but it was from her love of watching the live matches ringside at Madison Square Garden. It seems she received an offer from Andy Kaufman, who had also been involved with show wrestling. He had an idea for an off-Broadway comedy about wrestling. It was called T-Neck Tansy, the Venus Flytrap, and required Debbie to train for 8 weeks for the role of a female wrestler. It turned out the show was pretty popular for the local folks on the Lower East Side for 3 weeks straight, but when it finally got to premiere on Broadway, it lasted just one night only. Despite the comedy mastermind of Andy Kaufman behind the production, Debbie has no regrets about taking the role. It was also the only time audiences got to see Debbie with her real red hair color. Even if you're not a fan of Blondie, perhaps you've learned something more about Debbie Harry as a person and an actor. Which little-known fact surprised you more? And if you like seeing more great content like this, subscribe, like, and let us know in the comments. We'll see you soon.